Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nerdy Pastor, Pastor Ross Turner, coming to you again from Southeast Virginia. And been a few weeks since I've done a video, and I thought it would be good to talk up something that has been significant that God's used in my ministry for the last 8 or 9 years, and has used in my own life significantly on a personal level. But the importance of reading groups in your life and in your church. And so if you are just a typical congregant, I want to encourage you to find one. If you are a pastor or a lay leader of some kind, to start one or continue one if you're already on your way. But a reading group is really helpful for a church. I think first, I'll just tell you the reason I got involved with reading groups. I think first, as someone who enjoys reading, it helped me a lot to process what I'm reading with people in a fellowship context, but also in a discipleship context. So what I'm specifically talking about here in a reading group is books that lead to what John Bunyan called a heavenly conversation. So focusing on talking about God, talking about the Lord, and talking about walking with Jesus and living in the power of the Spirit. So reading groups have been very helpful in my life on a personal level because once I developed the habit of reading, the enjoyment of reading, really the next step is finding fellowship and discipleship in that same vein with others who want to do the same. Now, not everyone is going to want to do that. So it's kind of a particular kind of person that typically enjoys reading groups, those that like to read in general, not just, theology books or Christian discipleship books or devotionals or something, but people that are people that have disciplined themselves to read, you will find are great conversation partners and reading partners in these types of groups. There are people in every church that can make up a group like this and be a great benefit. But on a personal level, it has just been a very rich thing for my soul throughout the last almost 10 years of my life. Because one, after developing a habit of reading when I was in my early 20s, I read a little bit before that, but not very much. It started to really kind of spur on me to love and good deeds in fellowship, I think, with other brothers and sisters from that kind of richness of discipleship with them. It also helped me in my thinking and in my practical application of truth in my life. So it's just had a lot of benefits on a personal level with me. Now, how to begin a reading group for those of you that want to know is one, you need to find a book, okay, a book that is popular enough, I think, to inspire people to join, but is weighty enough, to sustain interest. That's the challenge of a reading group initially, at least. Once you get it going, you've kind of got it going. But to find a book that's popular enough but weighty enough to bring people in and to sustain the interest to read through the book is important. So I've done reading groups, gosh, for, like I said, almost 10 years. And I've done all kinds of books, heavy, heavy theological books when I've established a reading group for 2, 3 years. And then, very popular level books for folks that are just getting started. So as an example, after many, many years of reading, doing a reading group, I did John Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion. And it started with about, I think, 8 or 9, ended with about 4 or 5. But I mean, 4 or 5 made it all the way through. It was pretty fantastic. So that was encouraging. Just started 2 reading groups at my church currently. One with Jeremiah Burroughs, The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. Not the easiest book, I would say, just language-wise and even subject-wise, but still, very devotional and rich devotional book once you get into it. So still fairly practical, popular level book in many ways. And then I started another group with my church on a little bit more of a systematic work from involving the wonderful works of God, which is maybe, apart from Calvin's Institutes, one volume Institutes 1541, that's been well published recently and circulated because of its popularity. But I think probably the next to Calvin, the best one volume systematic theology ever written. And it's also from a modern theologian, Herman Bavinck. So started that group with about 20 folks in our church, and the Rare Jewel book started that with a group of a little over 30 which is a lot for a reading group, to be honest. I think typically reading groups are between 6 and 10 people. But if you've got more than that, the more the merrier, really, as long as folks are participating in the reading. So the key to having a reading group get off the ground is you've got to find a book that is wide enough in interest that will draw people in, and you're going to draw in most of the time readers, and that's good because that's really what it is. It's not a discussion group primarily; it's a reading group. So just remember, as you start a group, find a book that has wide enough popularity to get a group going, but it has enough gravitas to it to hold their interest over a couple months, because that's what it's going to take most of the time. A couple other little particulars about a reading group is, one, always really drive it towards discussion of people's own personal reflections on the reading. That's what makes it, to be honest, fun and rich. But at the very end, or somewhere in the middle, begin directing the group through the reading. So there's kind of a subjective response that we want in the group, but also some objective pattern of clarity for people. So there is a sense of, okay, where are we in this book, and moving them through that. Kind of give or take. So you don't want it to become a lecture, okay? You don't want the reading to become a teaching time. That's a real important part. But you don't want it just to become people's, personal reflections only, because then it kind of derails it to only discussion. So there's a little bit of both in the reading group that I would encourage, if you're leading one or want to lead one, that you get lots of feedback. You open it up for discussion, but then you give direction to the group and summary of the reading also at some point in the time, maybe at the beginning, maybe at the end. I typically do it at the end to summarize and to bring it to a head. So, and then another point of interest is deciding on how much the group can handle when it comes to the quantity of reading. You might consider, for a beginner's group, to not focus so much on how much they read, but a pattern of consistency. So as an example, in this book, the book is about 200, I think it's like 240 pages. Yeah, about 240 pages. Really, you could read that pretty quickly if you wanted to. The goal is not speed, though. The goal is not expedience. The goal is deliberation, discussion, faithfulness, repetition. So we're going to do this book over 15 or 16 weeks. So we're only reading about 15 pages a week, and there's enough in Burroughs. I mean, it's about the length of a sermon each time to really dig in. So find a book that has enough weight to sustain people's interest, but maybe don't do too much right away in the sense of the amount to read. In my other book group, the Boving group, we try to read about 40 pages because it's a longer book. It's 550 pages, so we're trying to read more there. I remember doing after many years with a reading group, challenging them to read something very modern and challenging, and not necessarily always orthodox, but just to challenge their thinking a little bit, to read Jürgen Moltmann's The Trinity and the Kingdom. And it was fascinating. We had a group of 10 people that have been with my group for almost 3 years, and they almost all made it through and wrestled with what Moltmann was saying. There are a lot of things in it that are helpful. There's some things that are in that book that are problematic, actually, in understanding about God's relationship to the world specifically. But still a very stimulating, very interesting discussion about, one of the great modern theologians in the 20th century, Jürgen Moltmann. So you don't do something like that unless you've been with a group for a long time and their muscles are built up. So just think of it a lot like training, a lot like discipleship training in a lot of ways, but also with that beautiful fellowship element that's in it. So I always like a reading group to kind of balance in between just fellowship and just pure teaching, lecture, discipleship kind of things. I think it's a good marriage of those two things. So if you're thinking about starting a reading group, find a book that has enough wide interest, also enough gravitas to sustain interest, and then start to build a core group of readers that you can sustain that group with for multiple years and read a whole lot. And then it becomes such a rich, joyful thing. So once you get off the ground, it kind of can sustain itself most of the time. And then lastly, is when should you meet? Well, I think it's an easy answer: when the folks are available. But try to make it in a way that it really stimulates. This the right time to stimulate discussion. Probably not after lunch. Probably not real late at night. People are worn out. I actually think most of the time, the best time is to do it before breakfast. I think that's the best time. Or during lunch. Now I've got one in the evening at 5:30 to 6:30 because it just is the only time it really works for our church and for those people. It fits right in that spot, and it's been really really good. But it limits the amount of people that can come because of work most of the time. Most of the time, some people can make it there, but the mornings typically are the times that are the most free, or lunch times. So I think of a way that will set up your group for success and for longevity. So, and lastly, let me just recommend some options for reading. I think if you've never done a reading group before and you really want to try one, I would suggest you start with Pilgrim's Progress. You start by taking people through the book number one, the first part one of Pilgrim's Progress. It's like 180, 190 pages. It's very, very popular level, but yet deeply, deeply rich and has so much weightiness to it. The more you read it, the more often you read it. So I'd say start with Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress if you have never done a reading group and you want to. Everyone's heard of the book, but in our generation, mine, and really even in older generations, people have stopped reading Christian classics. So you'll probably find that over half the people that come to the group have never read the book before, but everyone's heard about it. So start with that book, or start with C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, or the Screwtape Letters. Start with something that has a wide popular appeal, but has weightiness to it, and then pivot off that depending on how it goes. Now, you can also try to do a more academic reading group as well, and start with something that is plain in speech, introductory in level, but yet still is a true systematic theology. I would do something like Bavinck's Wonderful Works of God, Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion, 1541 edition, translated into English the last 10 years or so. It has been very, very useful. And there's a few others out there that might be helpful as well. But find something that still has a popular kind of wider appeal to get a group off the ground. And then you'll start to find who's the core of this group, and you can sustain that. So I want to impress you all out there that are listening, that listen to my channel. This is a fantastic tool for your and your churches, for many people, for their personal growth and the fellowship that they have. My church that I'm a pastor at is almost 55 years old, and a lot of folks have been a member of our church for 10 plus years, a lot. I've found that in these two groups, there's tons of people that don't know each other. It's crazy. Our church is, medium sized church, 500-600 people, but there's tons of people that don't know each other at all. They're in kind of their grooves in the church, and things like this will bring people together across age and stage of life, I think, wonderfully as well. So think about a reading group as a wonderful discipleship tool, fellowship tool, and learning tool for your church, and to think through, how can we inspire people to dig into, I think, weightier things, more traditional Christian classics. This is a great avenue, I think, to do that. All right, so I hope that encourages you. Signing off.